stories of CEOs and leaders behind company headlines. And I'm your host, Vlada Lotkina, startup founder, mentor. And today I have a very special guest. She is the best in the world to talk about empowering women to build their businesses. And Julia is the founder of Million Dollar Women, and she'll tell you more about it. And as Julia reminded me, this week is a Women's Celebration Week and a Women History Month. So you're in for a treat to learn more about Julia's journey, her ups and downs, and how she helps others to succeed. Welcome, Julia.
Thanks so much for having me. What a great week to be doing this. Yes, we're celebrating women on International Women's Day on March 8th, but also the whole month, right? Women's History Month. Even though at Million Dollar Women, every month is Women's Month, but now the whole world is paying attention. So thanks for having
Absolutely.
me on.
Absolutely, Julia. And what is your story in your own words? Just a brief synopsis. When I looked at your resume, I know it's a very vibrant one, and you've accomplished so much. But what is the quick version of that for folks to get to know you?
Well, I was kind of an unlikely entrepreneur, truly, Vlada, because my parents were academics. I did not grow up at the feet of entrepreneurs. Many entrepreneurs are, second generation or someone in their family had a business. My grandfather was a shoe salesman and then bought a pharmacy. So I guess he kind of had a business, but he didn't build that from scratch. And even though my father's business, the Pimsleur method, is a very big best-selling business today with Simon and Schuster, but when I was growing up, that was not the case. My dad was an academic, and I grew up wanting to be a creative person. Actually, I was a documentary filmmaker for my first career. Loved making documentaries about social issues, but then realized, you know what? That's not a good business model. Very few people make money making documentaries, and I like to make money. I grew up with like a single mom, and she was working so hard, and I lost my dad when I was young. That's what I mean, single mom, unfortunately. And then I just worked so hard all through high school, all through college, on scholarships. So I was ready to make money in my late 20s and early 30s. And that's when I started my first business. I was actually home on maternity leave with my son, and realized that there was no way to teach him French. I know you're multilingual, and I
Yes.
was lucky enough to grow up bilingual in French and English. And I thought, okay, well, I'm at work all day, but he can learn French through some like video or audio method, while I'm at work. But there was nothing on the market. I was really surprised. So that was my first company, my first money making company, because I had a film production company before that, but we made great films, but didn't make a lot of money.
Right.
And so I created a language teaching method for young children called Little Pim, and grew that from a $30,000 investment into a multi-million dollar VC backed business, making every mistake possible along the way. I didn't go to business school. I didn't have a finance background, so I had to learn it all on the job. And that's really what inspired me to do what I do now, which is coach other entrepreneurs. We did build that up into a multi-million dollar business, sold it to our largest partner. Hooray. But the truth is, along the way, I saw how hard it is for most women to get anywhere near 1 million in revenues. And I've always been big on social justice, helping women. So I decided to make this next chapter of my career all about helping more women get there.
That's amazing, Julia, and certainly a lot of parallels with my own journey. I started my company Class Tag when my daughter started school because I wanted to be a great parent, and I was struggling to get involved with the outdated communication. So you can consider also an unlikely entrepreneur solving right our own problem first, and I think that it's amazing to see you living your mission, right, to support other women to follow in your footsteps and
Thank
build
you.
build
Have
that
you
great
noticed,
business.
Vlada, that a lot of women, that's their story? I find a lot of women are like, I wanted to solve the problem I had a little more than men sometimes. Have you noticed that
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, I noticed that too. I noticed that too. And I wonder if that's because it gives more confidence to move forward. And so you are certain that problem actually exists because you've experienced it. And
Got
so,
it.
yeah, that's really interesting. And so if we go, Julia, into maybe more into Million Dollar Women, and I'm curious about sort of now you've seen thousands of women building their businesses. What do you see as the common challenges generally for, for the folks that you're supporting?
Yeah, I mean, first, I want to say 8 years into $1 Million Women that it's been such a privilege to work with some of the smartest, most ambitious, stop at nothing, big hearted women. I mean, women entrepreneurs are frigging amazing. And we feel so lucky at $1 Million Women that we're there to kind of help them along in the journey. There aren't as many women role models yet as we need. I know when I was building my business, Little Pim, I had a lot of mentors and coaches. None were women, maybe one mentor. So that's kind of the gap we're filling. And so that's my first answer to what women need
Hmm.
when you said, what's the main thing they're missing or they need? We need role models. We need to see people who look like us, who are doing the things we're doing. Also, I was a young mom. I had two little boys at home when I was building $1 Million Women. And some of the advice I was getting from male coaches and mentors really didn't work for me, right? It was like, oh, well, go to 10 trade shows this year. It's like, well, okay, who's going to raise my children? Like, no, that's not going to work for me. I can go to three maybe. So having the right role models is key. The second thing I see women needing to get help with is to undo some of the socialization we've had around money, around selling, around what it means to build a big multi-lane life. That's my new favorite word. I made it up. The multi-lane life. I think a lot of women don't want to be in just one lane, right? We want to
Yeah.
be great CEOs. We want to write a book. We want to raise our children. We want to be a great sister, daughter, wife, lover,
Right.
friend, right? So we shouldn't have to pick. And men don't, by the way. I know so many men. I was in the entrepreneurs organization for years, and like every person you met there had five businesses.
Right.
But somehow when it's women, it's like, oh no, you better focus, like don't bite off too much. So undoing socialization is a big, big one. And almost everything falls under that. In fact, like not knowing how to delegate and outsource, that also falls under socialization, right? Because we get rewarded for being like good multitaskers instead of
Right.
rewarded for being good leaders and delegating
Hmm.
and outsourcing
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
And I guess the third thing I would say is the financial acumen. And I say that with all humility because that was my worst thing when I had little Pim. I really had to get so much help in training with getting my arms around the numbers, right? You don't have to become an accountant, but you do have to understand the key drivers in your business. And I think that's an area women have to do some catching up.
Can't agree more. And I think it's funny that in your intro you said that you didn't have an MBA, and so that was the challenge. And I did have an MBA, and financial wasn't a challenge. But I think what was still a challenge is if you're building a rapidly scaling business, right, rapidly growing business, if you're really ambitious, you need to be so laser focused on the right metrics, right? Not just know your all of your numbers, right? Because that doesn't help, right? You need the system of
That's right.
smoke
Which are the
signals,
numbers that matter?
right, that matter, right? And I think that's always a challenge. And I think mentorship here plays a really big role in helping me
Yeah,
understand
and
what
and
they
maybe we
are.
could give a little tip for anybody listening. I mean, I'm sure you have listeners all up and down the
Yeah.
levels of
Yeah.
revenues, but I know that for me, when I was trying to get to 1 million, it was very critical to understand my KPIs, my key performance indicators. And so they're both leading and lagging
Right.
KPIs, right? So a leading KPI is something that's an indicator that like you might get clients, like maybe tons of people visiting your website or signing up for your newsletter. And then a lagging KPI, key performance indicator, is like, well, how many clients did you get this month? How many people renewed? And once you get, like you said, laser focused, right, on tracking those numbers, if you have a team, getting the team to feed up those numbers to you so
Right.
you're not trying to log into 12 different places to find them, that is a critical factor in getting to that $1 million mark. For us, million, but maybe someone listening, they're trying to get to 500,000, and that's also amazing, right? Scaling is scaling.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, we talked about challenges that you see for others, and you briefly mentioned about yours. I would love to go back in time when sort of there was this transformation for you. And usually that's what happens when you have your lowest low, then you transform in a better version of you, right? And I'm wondering sort of what that moment was and how and who and why you persevered.
Yes. Well, there were so many moments, like every entrepreneur. It's like, which one do I pick? And some of them I talked about in Million Dollar Women, my book. Like in there, shared a time that I was like literally crying on my couch in my conference room. Like, I'm not getting off this couch ever again. And this is why we need entrepreneurial sisters. One of my
Right.
fellow entrepreneurs, a CEO, she was texting me, like, no, you're getting off the couch. You're coming to this party. I have wine waiting for you. And she single handedly got me off that couch. So that one I told in Million Dollar Women. But one I haven't talked about as much is when I was raising capital for Million Dollar Women, and I ultimately raised 6 million, but that was over 4 or 5 year period. I hit a real wall in the early days of raising that money. We all know that less than 2% of venture capital goes to women run businesses. So a lot of what happens when you're raising capital is you can get the meeting, but you can't get the deal. Like the VCs, who are largely men, are curious, like,
Right.
okay, well, who are you? How did you get in front of me, right? Since there's so few
Right.
women successfully raising, but then
Right.
you come home without the check and it's super demoralizing. And so I remember after about 9 months of just, hitting the pavement, all these meetings, coming into my office for Little Pim, the language teaching company, and just feeling so demoralized. Like I had a team of 9 and they were all there working away, and the holiday season was coming up. That was like our biggest moment. But if I didn't raise this capital, this whole thing was going to go away, right? And every entrepreneur knows this feeling of like it's all on my shoulders. And I do remember walking into the office and seeing my head of marketing and my head of accounting sitting down, like really, head down, figuring out the holiday marketing plan. And I realized, okay, you know what? They've got this. Like they're pros. My number one job is to raise that money. And
Right.
it's not if, it's when.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I made that decision. It's not if, it's when. Because I think I was raising it with that kind of if, like, okay, well, if it
Mhm.
doesn't work, I'll just fire a couple people. Right. And it's like, no, 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 no. And that re energized me to get back out there. And I did ultimately raise the money. We didn't have to fire anybody. We hired more people. We actually hired someone away from Disney. That was kind of fun. But I
Right.
think as CEOs, we get tested in so many of these moments, right? Where it's like, am I going to go home, or am I going to find a new resilience inside of me that I didn't know that I had?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this analogy to war and burning bridges, right? Like in the old times, talking about, you came to this new territory, you came to fight, you don't have a way to back out, right? And I think recently someone asked me a similar question, and that's kind of, it was the first time that I actually articulated that for myself, because I just didn't know there isn't any other way. I knew I'm going to raise and I'm going to scale and I'm going to grow. And it was not, there were no other options. All optionality has been gone. And I think
Did you have
that,
a moment like that too, where it was like, oh, this is the moment where
oh,
maybe you've already
plenty.
told the story, but I'd love to hear it. Can I hear the mini version?
Yeah, sure. Well, there were plenty of stories like this, right? And I think that one in particular was when we were going through M&I process, and the offer was revoked at the 11th hour, and
Oh,
that was just absolutely soul crushing. It was the lowest low for me because I already told all of my investors that I'm
oh,
ready to sell the business. And then war started in Ukraine, where my parents were, and my employees, or folks that on the development and product side. And so it was all together intertwined. And
it's devastating.
I yeah, I couldn't speak probably for like 24 hours. I just couldn't. And then what saved me was Pilates, from all things. So I just
Move your
trained
body. Just
for
move your body.
10 hours till I felt acute physical pain. And then I said, okay, fine. Now I got it. Now I'm going to move forward. Right. So
I love
that
it.
was my saving grace.
That's amazing. And yes, I mean, we've all had those moments, right? Where it's like something you thought was going to come through, the bottom falls out. And look, it is part of entrepreneurship. I do often have to remind myself of one of my mantras. I didn't make this up, but I've adopted it as one of my mantras, which is, if it was easy, everyone would do it. Who doesn't want to own their own business, right? That sounds super fun. And you have all this freedom, but there almost daily something that comes up, right? Where you could have to say to yourself, well, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And the one you experienced was one of those real lows, but
Yeah,
good for
real
you.
lows, but after that, your fear just goes away, or or no, fear maybe not doesn't go away, but you are braver, right? Because you can persevere. You have already so many
Yes.
data points in the past that tell
Well,
you
and
that
but
you
also
can.
you asked about, what are some issues specifically affecting women? And again, it's Women's History Month. We're
Right.
celebrating women. And I do think we're not raised with as much risk taking
Hmm.
socialization. A lot
Right.
of young boys are pushed into things that they take a lot of risks, right? Sports is the main one you think of. But girls are often encouraged to do like quieter things, right? Or not things that build up that risk taking muscle. So I think that's something where we have to do some extra work as women, is like you took that risk, right? In that moment, it, didn't work out, but then you just said, all right, well, that didn't work out. I'll find another way forward. And that's a muscle to build, right? That we
Yeah.
definitely need as business owners.
Absolutely. And, I think sports plays an important role. And as someone who danced all her childhood, my daughter
Ah,
is a water polo player. So
amazing.
she is
Water
taking the
polo. I
risks.
love it. Yes, that's awesome. And it's true that anyone who's played sports, they've had that experience of failing, falling down, getting
Hmm.
hurt, getting back up, and it does build that muscle memory. But it
Absolutely.
doesn't only have to come through sports.
Right.
Like I didn't do sports, but I was a documentary filmmaker. And when you make films, right, you project them very publicly. Sometimes they get good reviews, sometimes they don't, sometimes they get bought, sometimes they don't. So I think any experience women can draw from where they took a risk, and even if they, didn't succeed, it's not life ending, right? I think we sometimes get up in
Absolutely.
our head like, well, if it's not perfect and if it's not, a huge win, then it's like a devastating failure. And in fact, we can iterate a number of times in life. I'm in my fourth career, not because any of them failed, but because I decided, okay, I wanted something different. So, we have to be
Absolutely. And,
careful of
and
that
you were
with perfectionism.
brave to venture into new territory. So you repeated that process, right? Because every business you start, it's a new, it's a brand new journey, right? Especially if it's a different industry, different business model, right? And
Totally. I
yeah,
just started craving a new set of problems. I don't know if
yeah,
anybody else can relate to this, but it's
yeah.
less that I thought it would be so much easier doing something else, but I just wanted a new set of problems. So
Right,
that's what's
right. You're
driven
a
me to change.
growth junkie. You're looking to
I am.
grow, right? And
I am a lifelong learner and growth
right,
junkie. I like your
yeah.
term.
Well, talking about growth, I loved your phrase about you cannot take sale out of scale, right? And so I want to talk about sales, and women or not, that's a absolutely fundamental skill, right? If the first thing you need to do is to know how to sell. So
Yes.
let's talk about it. What are I don't know, maybe top tips or things that you can share
Well, the
from
first thing is I've noticed most women have not had any sales training. And when I was growing my business, Little Pim, the language teaching business, we got to about 400,000 in revenues just through sheer hustle and grind, right? But then I started looking around at the really successful entrepreneurs and seeing, okay, they're making 2 million, 10 million. What are they doing differently than us? And they all had sales training. So I went out and got trained, not by one, not by two. I took about 4 or 5 different sales trainings. Some of the big ones like Sandler, right? And I also did Russ Ruffino and Jack Daly and some of the greats. And as I took all these sales trainings, obviously I applied it to my business, and that's part of how we sold so many millions of dollars of product at Little Pim. But I also realized they were all kind of teaching the same thing. So I like to make complex things simple. I consider that's one of my superpowers, is making complex things simple. So since women don't have sales training, I took everything I learned and I distilled it down into a very easy to learn course. And it really just teaches 3 things. It teaches the right mindset for selling. It teaches how to have a script and follow it, and what to do on every single sales call or meeting. So you have a method that you can go to and have that confidence. And then it teaches closing, because closing is the hardest part of selling. I always like to
right,
say it's all fun and games until the close, right? Like, who
right,
doesn't like to get on calls with clients and, talk about their problems? Like, that's the fun part. But
right.
once it's time to close, if you don't have those skills, you can't make it up on the fly. Did you have sales training as well, Vlada? We didn't have a chance to talk about this before.
I actually no, I didn't have sales training. Actually, that was one skill that I regretted, like, or one job that I regretted never having earlier in my career. I was like gosh, I wish as a teen I was a salesperson, because that's such a critical skill. And I just sort of learned on a job. I think when we were
Well, you were
scaling
clearly
the
good at
business.
it, given how you grew your company, right?
Yes,
But you just
exactly. So I
made
scaled
it
it
up.
to the first 8-digit number myself, and then I hired a team to build it from there. But yes, it was a wild west. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was selling. But
I love
everything
it.
is
Yeah,
selling. As raising funds is selling too, right? Hiring
absolutely.
people is selling. If you want someone
Yes.
great who has many options, right? You're selling
You're
all your
constantly
life.
selling. So why don't we get more training in this, right? Why was that left out of our business education? So I'm trying to fill in those gaps now for women. And we
Amazing.
just created some very affordable sales training that people can do either by themselves online. That's just sales-cure.com if anybody wants to check it out. Or we run programs throughout the year where I live coach and bring examples. And I think you saw that right before this show. I was doing
Right.
my live show on LinkedIn where I'm just giving sales tips, because even though we're still very excited about our mission of helping a million women get to 1 million in revenues, we
Right.
realize that without the sales training, that's going to be really tough. So we're really leaning into that sales training right now and focusing on that every woman at every stage of business should get sales training. I don't care if you just opened your company yesterday. Go get the sales training. You'll get to that
Absolutely.
first 100,000 or 500,000 so
Yeah.
much quicker.
Yeah, and what I find with software entrepreneurs is that many of them start building, and that can take quite a bit budget to build what they think the market needs before they actually start selling, right? And the best way to actually build a product is to sell it first and then build it, right? And
Yeah,
so
see what
that's
people want, right? See what
what,
the customers want, because we
but
know
not only
that
one,
if
and willing to pay for, right? That's when they
yes,
vote with their check, that's very different from would you like this product, right? Or um
yeah, and then
that
you have a chance to make those changes before you even go live with it, or
right.
maybe just after kind of version
Exactly.
one. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Well,
thanks for asking about that. Yeah, we're
yeah,
excited. Both
amazing.
sellers.
And I know we're coming up on time, Julia. So I wanted to ask you about the best way to get in touch with you, and B, learn about your programs, maybe specifically who they're for, and where people apply and learn more about them.
Yeah, so anyone can find me at millionwomen.com, which is where we show all of our programs. We also have a national network of women business owners who are in an online community. So those are options for working with us. And you can also book a call at scalewithjulia.com. So that makes it pretty easy. And please come to my LinkedIn lives and learn sales for free with me for a little while, just to see if, I'm your cup of tea. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. So but the people we're for, we're really for. And that is what we try to teach our business owners too, is like, find your customer, make sure you know what their problem is, and serve them at the highest possible level, and you will never have a problem growing your business. So we do practice what we preach on that front. And thank you so much for having me on, especially in this Women's History Month. What a great way to celebrate with a successful women business owner like yourself. And thanks for what you're doing for all CEOs through this Unboxed podcast. I love the name,
Absolutely.
CEO
Only
Unboxed.
raw and unfiltered. And Julia, thank you so much for sharing your stories of perseverance. I think it's so important to hear not only the highs, but also the journeys. And thank you for sharing that and offering so many great resources to women who aspire to build their businesses and be in charge of their fortunes. So, thank you, Julia, and please find us on LinkedIn and YouTube, streaming bi-weekly, as well as on Spotify and other podcasting platforms.
Thanks for having me